The trustees meeting to order. Welcome. Vanessa, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Chair Milliken,
Here.
Vice Chair Davis,
Here.
Treasurer DeMarty,
DeVarty here.
Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher here.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming here.
Trustee Landau,
Landau here.
Trustee McKnight.
McKnight Morton here.
Thank you. We have an agenda in front of us. Could I hear support for the agenda, please?
Support. Second.
And a second. Thank you, Ruth. All in, do we need a roll call or
No, voice vote.
all in favor say aye?
Aye.
No, it has to be a voice.
It has to be.
Has to be a roll call.
Oh, really?
Everything.
They all have to be roll call
All
on
roll
Zoom.
call. Yeah.
Vanessa, please call the roll.
Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis,
Davis, yes.
Treasurer DeMarty,
DeVarty, yes.
Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher, yes.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming, yes.
Trustee Landau,
Landau, yes.
Trustee McKnight Morton.
McKnight Morton, yes.
Thank you. The agenda is approved. We have minutes of our January 26th meeting. Do I hear a motion for their approval?
I move the approval of the minutes.
Second from DeVarty.
Thank you. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis, Vice Chair Davis,
Davis, yes.
Treasurer DeMarty,
DeVarty, yes.
Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher, yes.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming, yes.
Trustee Landau,
Landau, yes.
Trustee McKnight Morton. Trustee McKnight Morton,
McKnight Morton, yes.
Thank you. The minutes stand approved. Citizen participation. WCC Education Association, Ms. Kissel, are you with us this evening?
I believe you should be hearing me.
Please
Indeed.
All right.
proceed. Thank you.
It is February 2021. 6 weeks into the semester, and many faculty and staff are taking a bit of a breather this week as we look to the second half of the term, opening of spring and fall registration, graduation, continued clarity into the vaccinations. I so wish that the WCCEA and the MEA had more insight about the availability and timing of vaccines, but like the college has learned, the situation is fluid and there are many concrete answers and there are very few concrete answers from the county or Lansing. So let's hope that after another month, some of our questions will be answered. The WCCA does continue to do what we can to help with future planning. Over the past few weeks, we have worked to clarify and extend language for our current adjunct members, so no one will lose their status if unable to make load. We also continued talks on staffing and hiring for both full-time and adjunct positions as our colleagues retire or industry pushes us in new directions. With the guidance from department chairs, we will work proactively with the administration to plan for our needs in the fall as best we can, whether we are on campus or working from home. Last month, I spoke of 2 grievances. We have settled 1 grievance in recent weeks. This grievance dealt with the use of Blackboard prior to the official start of term. The WCCEA appreciates the efforts of the VPI and CITL and the technology fix and subsequent language, really clarifying a process that should be both flexible and useful to the faculty, staff, and students. The second grievance that impacts our classified members is one that has been bubbling for months, and the WCCEA board has unanimously approved moving this issue to arbitration. The board agrees that the proposed resolutions from the college miss the mark, especially given the time and energy spent on this concern, a concern that was originally brought to the WCCEA by the college in 2019. Unfortunately, each offer has only seemed to confuse the intent and hope of the original discussions, and the members have little faith that the resolution can be reached without arbitration. Yet, discussions continue. I've shared with the college that there is still an opportunity for a settlement while we wait for an arbitration date, a settlement that honors the contract and our membership, setting us up for further discussions during the 2022 scheduled negotiations. As this is February, the WCCEA is also in the process of getting ready for its first ever virtual vote for our area representatives who are elected each year. I want to send a special thanks to our election chair, Greg Heidebrink, in running the March election. After this vote, the new WCCEA board will have its first meeting in March. And as always, I look to end my notes with something positive. The next time this body meets, we will have been off campus for 1 year. In that time, I have witnessed amazing things from my colleagues. We've all learned new ways of doing, of seeing, of listening. For that, I am so very grateful and so very humbled to serve the WCCA membership. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Still, for your comments. Vanessa, were there any public communications received?
No, there was none.
Are there any written communications?
There was none.
All right, thank you. Telephone.
Yeah, oh, sorry. If I could find the,
Call from Michigan. Call. Call from Michigan.
Oh.
Call.
geez, where's the,
Well, let's move to special reports while Ruth manages her telephony there.
I'm sorry.
We have an affirmative action report. And Associate VP Mahali is here, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Please step forward. Thank you.
I will do so. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen here. Try to. All right. Okay, and I'm having problems getting the screen shared.
Take your time.
Okay. Let me try this again.
Maybe we can go back to Ruth and her telephone.
Here we go. Hopefully you can see this now.
Yes.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. I'm Chris Mahaley, the Associate Vice President of Human Resources. And today I'm going to take you through the highlights of the 2020 Affirmative Action Report. As a reminder, this report covers the time frame of January 16, 2020 through January 16, 2021. The agenda for this presentation includes a review of the pandemic impact on our staffing levels, a recap of the board policy on affirmative action, the initiatives and outcomes this past year, as well as our continued focus for the current year. January 2020 to January 2021 was not a normal year for anyone. Like several other employers, the pandemic had a substantial impact on our staffing levels. Back in March of 2020, our employment focus shifted quickly to the needs of online instruction and student support areas. Full-time faculty vacancies that we planned to fill were instead covered by temporary appointments as we adjusted to our enrollment and online needs. The uncertainty of enrollment and the unknown return to normal operations led us to reevaluate our staffing needs, specifically with full-time independent staff and part-time support staff positions. A hiring freeze, reduction of hours, position eliminations, and additional unexpected retirements ensued. For the first time in a few decades, our employee separations greatly exceeded the number of new hires and promotions. But all was not lost this past year. We shifted our focus to what we could control, and that was the continuation in recruiting a diverse candidate pool and filling a limited number of positions. The key point I'm going to ask you to keep in mind as we move through this presentation is that this was not a normal year in our staffing. As a reminder, per the board policy on affirmative action, The college will seek and employ qualified personnel and provide equal opportunities during the employment process. The college will not discriminate based on religion, race, color, national origin, age, sex, height, weight, disability, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or any other protected status. And the college's employment of women and minority individuals shall be aligned with the employed population of Washtenaw County. Our initiatives focused on HR policies and procedures in regard to recruitment and selection, as well as training and development, all in support of building and maintaining a diverse workforce. The initiatives this past year included strategic recruitment efforts, consistency in employment process and reduction of bias in selection, and the college's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our first initiative focused on strategic recruitment efforts. We talked a little bit about adjusting our recruiting efforts last year by moving from casting a wide net through several publications to a more concentrated and direct recruiting effort. And we continued with the same focus this year. We started by revamping our advertising budget. We used data collected from previous recruiting sources to promote our open positions with effective diversity recruiting resources and packages, such as the diversity booth through Chronicle Careers, the Higher Education Diversity and Education Outreach, diversityjobs.com, and the Michigan Higher Ed Recruiting Consortium. We then targeted social media. We searched and connected with specific diversity groups, such as Leaders in Higher Ed and International Higher Education Teaching and Learning Association, both with heavy emphasis on diversity in higher ed. Through these groups and other connections, we sought out those candidates that were not actively looking for a job. Our efforts resulted in a 50% plus diverse applicant pool for positions including Dean of Students and Director of Advising, and a 44% minority new hire rate during this reporting year. This chart shows the trend in full-time diversity new hires, both by percent and by count. From a 26% minority representation in 2016 to 41 and 44% respectively in 2019 and 2020, we are seeing that trend increase. Now keep in mind again, the limitations with our hiring for 2020. We had 9 total new hires for 2020 versus an average of 38 new hires over the previous 4 years. So quite a difference this past year. This chart provides a comparison of qualified diversity applicants by employment classification. As you can see, the diversity applicant pool for our executive and professional managerial positions range from 40 to 50%. While we focus primarily on part-time faculty hiring, we saw 39% of our applicants identified as minority. This recruiting action and data is key for us. In order to influence our diversity in hiring, we have to commit to attracting and recruiting a qualified, diverse pool of candidates. This is where it all has to start. The next initiative was our focus on the employment process and continued education of the reduction of bias in candidate selection. We placed an effort on adjusting our hiring practice to maintain consistency among employment classifications, as well as with full-time and part-time faculty and staff. We created an online process and hiring manager toolkit that is used for the hiring of all employee classifications, and it includes guidelines on applicant review in minority underutilized areas, the responsibility of a search committee, the interview process, and questions with emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we continue with the required training of all faculty and staff prior to them serving on a search committee. That includes training on unconscious bias, diversity and bias in the search committee process, and diversity in the workplace. Even though we had limited hiring this past year, we still had approximately 20 search committee members complete this training. This chart shows the full-time promotion data along with the new hire data to show the 5-year trend. With a slight reduction in minority promotions last year, we experienced an increase this year, but again, on a reduced number of total positions versus previous years. We had 12 positions this year for which we promoted employees compared to an average of 39 positions over the past 4 years. So again, quite a difference this past year in our staffing. The last initiative is the college's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Through the Teaching and Learning Center, which is focused on training and professional development for faculty, as well as human resources, diversity, equity, and inclusion training has expanded over the past 3 years to include a variety of webinars, on-demand videos, film screenings, and in-person sessions. And we've also seen an increase in faculty and staff participation. While faculty and staff are eligible to attend any of the trainings, we do have required professional development for faculty, OPT, and independent staff, which includes focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you heard in the State of College address last month, President Belanca emphasized the college's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we are excited to kick off a training that has been customized for WCC. The program will be piloted with the Administrative Leadership Group in March, and we look forward to continuing to expand this priority through the entire college over the next several months. Outcomes from our training over the past 3 years include an average of 40 diversity, equity, and inclusion focused sessions held each year. Over 600 employees participate annually in this related training. And our training is focused on today's issues. And a couple of those trainings are listed here on the slide, which include coping with the impact of racial injustice, recognizing race-related stress, racism and structural inequity in America, and Out and Outstanding, Intro to LGBTQ+ in the Workplace. Now that we had a couple years to further define our direction and identify which actions resulted in the best success, we plan to continue down this path with our continued focus. With our 2021 faculty hiring campaign, we're going to utilize what we've done over the past couple years with specific targeted recruitment. And we plan to use our resources to identify groups, affiliations, and schools that will help us reach a directed group of diverse candidates with a background in the field of study we are recruiting for. Again, this faculty hiring campaign is focused on full-time faculty positions that we are actually getting started for the recruiting process as we speak. We will continue to move forward with the consistency in the hiring process, as well as continued education and bias in the interviewing and selection process. And finally, we look forward to the continued growth in our faculty and staff's understanding of diversity and inclusion, not only in the hiring process, but across campus and in the classrooms via the resources offered through the Teaching and Learning Center, Human Resources, and the extended program as committed by the President's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. And finally, we are also very excited to have Dr. Reed with us and look forward to collaborating with him as we move forward with this initiative. Lastly, I think it's important, we don't typically show our staff, but I think it's important to share with you and recognize the dedicated team of WCC employees that support and influence our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in their everyday tasks. It is through these actions of these employees that we're able to move forward with these initiatives. In recruiting and employment and human resources, we have Christian Flanagan and Megan Kiefer. And in training and development from the Teaching and Learning Center, we have Teresa Hunt, and in human resources, Andrea Hemphill. And that concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you. Now we know why you all are so successful. It's nice to see your staff and their faces here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Haley. Thank you.
Thank you.
EVP Johnson, do you have a vendor diversity report for us now?
I do, Chair Milliken.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. Thank you.
you turn to the next page, please? Thank you. So tonight we are going to go through the college's efforts to continue to build out not only its pool of available minority and women-owned vendors, but also to walk through the data as to how the fiscal year 19-20 worked out. And to kind of follow on with AVP Mihaley's comments, this past year was unlike any other year, and it certainly had an impact on spending for this prior year, and we'll walk through that. We'll go through our vendor bases, the purchasing practices, the activities that our purchasing department led by Barb Fillinger and her team have really put in place to help to build out our diverse vendor databases. And then finally, we'll walk through the financial trends with that. Next slide, please. So the purchasing policy, as approved by the board, so expenditures, and again, this is all for non-capital, non-construction expenditures. Expenditures that are less than $3,000 are less up to the best judgment of the employee on campus who has authority for that spending. Between $3,000 and $10,000, we require 3 bona fide quotations for those items. And then above 10,000 requires a sealed bid RFP process. Next slide, please. As you can see from this graph, for non-construction, we had a little over $21 million spend. About 83% of their 17.7 million was for items that are large contracts that the board had either prior approved or recurring items. Like software contracts that we might have, various services that we have. So those are not under bid in this current year. We also had about 2.5 million that is purchased through P cards. And so for P cards, these are items that are under the $500 spend limit. And it's various things. It's office supplies that we're using our P card to buy out through Amazon. This past year, the college did a great job of leveraging an Amazon business account, which has really availed the college of a lot of competitive pricing. Staples accounts, there's a number of areas where we use our P card. In a typical year, we'd be doing a lot of conferencing and travel. That would also be going through, in many cases, through P card. So really, for our further discussion today, we're looking at that orangish slice there, about 1.2 million that was put out for bid this past fiscal year. Next slide, please. So our purchasing vendor base, we have a lot of different sources that we use for it. So we have recommendations that come from the person who wants to buy the goods or service. Our purchasing team is constantly checking trade commodity publications. We contact our manufacturers for authorized distributors in or close to the county. Vendors constantly are reaching out to the college and ask to be put on our vendor database lists. We participate in a number of purchasing consortiums, and My Deal is one of those. And so we really avail ourselves of the larger purchasing databases and the vendors that are eligible to be part of those. And certainly, but not least, is the Michigan Minority Business Development Council. And we are members of that, and they offer a nice, deep, rich vendor base as well. Each and every one of our vendors that are in our vendor database, we have contacted them to see if they're either and or minority or women owned. And that's a process we go through on a regular basis. Next slide, please. Purchasing practices. We always strive to provide the requisition or exactly the items that they're ordered at the lowest possible price. And when vetting that, we look at quality, delivery, and service. So a lot of different attributes. Next slide, please. Per our board policies and per Michigan Community College Act requirements, we give preference to Washtenaw County vendors where the price and quality are equal, or where there's a definite advantage for being local. I mean, service calls is a good example of that, of being able to support the products and services. And then from the Michigan Community College Act, there's a preference to be given to vendors in the state of Michigan. So those are two lenses that we take all our bids through. Next slide, please. So what are the activities that within the purchasing department that we've been doing over these past few years, and then in specifically this last year, to really help build out the potential for increasing the number of minority women-owned vendors that are participating in the college's purchasing? So we are members of the Michigan Minority Business Development Council. We also attend their meeting, and at that meeting, we really try to build out relationships with other members of that council to enhance our database vendors. In fiscal 20, we've continued to build out that database. So now our minority women-owned database is in excess of 430 vendors that we continually work with. And then last but not least, in fiscal 20, we are always reaching out to potential matches of minority women-owned vendors who are a good match with the bid we're about to put out. And in over 90% of the cases of all the bids we put out last year, we were able to find a match. We contacted that vendor. In many cases, it's multiple minority women-owned vendors. We contact them. We let them know the bids are going to be put out, and we invite them to participate. Next slide, please. So the typical spend at the college for minority women-owned, you can see the list here. It ranges from custodial supplies and technology needs, instructional, training, temporary staffing, catering, child services, plant maintenance, transcription, closed captioning, and promotional items. Next slide, please. So in terms of the numbers, as I mentioned, fiscal 20, needless to say that our total spending was impacted, and the spending that went towards minority and women-owned was impacted. So for the last 2 years, if I draw your attention to line 4, you will see that about 17% of our buying, after you back out the large recurring services, about 17% was going for minority and women-owned firms. This year, it dipped down to 15%. But frankly, the sole reason for that dip down is that areas where we had less spending in fiscal 20 because of COVID were in temporary labor, and that was the firm Manpower, and in catering for Fabulous Foods. Those two firms alone, we had over $500,000 of reduced spending year over year as a result of COVID, directly as an impact of COVID. So in red, you will see that I've calculated what our spend would have been in fiscal 20 for minority women-owned if we had normal spending patterns for those two areas. And we would have been right at the same that we've been the last 2 years, at about 17% of our spending would have been for minority and women-owned. Next slide, please. So in summary, the college continues to pursue avenues to increase our minority women-owned vendor participation. We have a database of over now 430 minority and women-owned. Over 90% of our bids this past year, we were able to identify a good match of a minority women-owned firm, and we invited them to bid. And then for next year, we're looking at participating in 2 new bid platforms that are exclusively available to Michigan governmental agencies, Bid for Michigan and Mitten. And we're in the final steps of vetting those platforms. We believe that's a strong direction for the college. And in doing so, we are going to be able to more than double the college's access to minority and women-owned vendors. And we believe that'll be a great move for the college in terms of competitive bidding, but also a very important move of being able to gain access and be able to get even greater matches of our purchasing needs with minority women-owned firms. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you for that. What's a P card?
Oh, that's a purchasing card, and that's issued to employees that have that need. It's like a credit card.
Thank you. Any other questions of EVP Johnson?
Yeah, I have a question.
I do.
Ruth, go ahead.
Maybe it's a suggestion. I think it's fantastic that we're now involved with many more Michigan minority business platforms. But I still think that the larger contracts, and when you see people working on campus, there's not much minority representation on large construction projects. And I have a suggestion, maybe off the wall, but would it be, I would assume that contractors would like to have our business. We probably have more money than most, and we do a lot of construction work around the campus. Is there any way that we could link or leverage participation in the companies somewhere by our students? In other words, could we require an internship in that company for one of our students, or an apprenticeship for one of our students? If the student wants it, I mean, we'd have to match it up. But to have some direct input into that company for our minority students who might be interested in that kind of work, to open the door for them. And I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if you can, hold them hostage until they hire one of our students, but just a temporary internship or a temporary apprenticeship, working with our apprenticeship program or internship program to get some of our students involved in some of these larger companies that do a lot of the larger work on campus. Just an idea.
I think I think the spirit of the idea, Trustee Hatcher, is really, really good. And the college currently, when we go out for construction contracts and many other contracts, actually, we have what we call a responsible contractor form. So we're asking for information about each of the companies that's going to bid. One of those questions is around their training programs and their apprenticeship programs. And the college has a strong preference towards companies that have a Class A apprenticeship program that's registered with the Department of Labor. And so one of the ways that I would think that we would be able to leverage your idea is for us to find ways to start to connect, and we already have many of these connections through our apprenticeship programs with companies. And in that process, then get the connection of our students being able to avail themselves of apprenticeship programs. So I think the groundwork is there, and we'd like to think more about that opportunity.
Any other questions?
Yes,
I
I
have
do.
a question for Chris. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ruth.
I just have a few questions for Chris. I didn't get to ask questions. Do we have a sense yet, and maybe it's for Bill as well, do we have a sense yet of how many faculty positions will be open? I know we haven't done the budget yet, but is there some inkling of an increase or not for the fall? No. Okay.
Kim?
Right now, as Chris mentioned, with those temp positions, we definitely need to fill those positions. And there are some other positions that are also open. So I would say right now, not sure about an increase, but there definitely is going to be a handful of searches over the summer for full-time permanent positions.
Okay. Also, how many departments or areas are underrepresented still? Is it the same number? Have we got?
Yeah, we didn't see much change in that. I saw a couple changes with our with some of the underutilizing moving, but we're still looking at quite a handful that are under the 20%. It looks like about 15 or so. And again, Trustee Hatcher, this is departments that have at least 5 full-time staff members in the area. So yeah, so very little movement on that. We did see support services and student advocacy and arts and science administration moved from underutilized up onto the chart. So making a little bit.
Do we know how Eric and Cicely found us, or did we find them?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. We did, yeah, a little bit of both. So very pleased about just the targeting recruiting that we're doing and really diving deep into LinkedIn and making those connections. And again, I don't know, and I'm not going to speak for Eric. I don't know if he was actively searching, but we found him. So we're really happy about that. And same with Cicely.
Very good. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, trustees?
Yes, I have a question for Bill Johnson, VP Johnson. You say that there's 430 minority businesses that we have on a vendor list. Of those numbers, how many are in the Washtenaw County area, if there are any?
Trustee McKnight-Morton, that's a really good question. I don't have the answer to it. We certainly have a preference towards Washtenaw County vendors, but I don't have that, and I'll be glad to get that for you.
Okay, I'm interested because I know there's the labor unions, but I know there's got to be some vendors in the Washtenaw County area. But I just would like to know if you had that information. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Dave DeVarty?
This is also about the 430 women and minority-owned in our database. I know with the pandemic, a lot of small businesses are being particularly hard hit in this economy, and many of them are looking at potential bankruptcy, going out of business, or really struggling. Would it be, I'm curious, how many of that 430 in our database do we currently have business relations, like contractual or relationships with currently? And if there's anything we can do to reach out to them and ask them how their business is doing, or ways that we can modify our contractual relationship to assist them through a difficult time if they're experiencing it. But those sorts of kind of assertive steps to help those businesses stay in business, particularly the ones that we're presently engaged with. Is that a possibility?
That yes, I would say yes, that we certainly can reach out to them. We continually try to reach out to them where there's a match. So for instance, this past year, we had reached out to about 70 vendors that were a good match for the bid. So we know we had contact with them, and regularly we reach out to them to make sure that we understand what their current business lines are, so that we update our databases. So I think the commitment that we can make is over this next few months is to reach back out to them to re-verify and maybe ask that question, Trustee DeVarty. I think that's a worthy question to understand kind of where their current state of business is.
Yeah, and if there's anything, especially with ones we're currently working with, if there are ways that we can do things, prepay a contract or something like that to keep them in business and keep our engagement running at this time when they may be experiencing particular difficulties.
I think as a public institution, whatever terms that we would offer to one, we have to offer to all as part of that bid process.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Any other questions of VP Johnson? Thank you.
Thanks.
TargetX update is next on our agenda. EVP Hearns, can you bring us up to speed, please?
All right. Good evening, everyone. All right. So I'm glad that we're here this evening to be able to talk about TargetX. I think, is everybody seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so thank you. I just want to, as we delve into providing an implementation update, I just want to review exactly kind of what we talked about when we decided to have a student platform for our relationship building for our students. Some of the key things that we were looking at was we want to provide a comprehensive view of our students and our student relationships, a system that would allow us to see everything about our students from recruitment to retention, and then also providing access and the ease of immediate data for intervention. So not just waiting to the end of the semester for our students, for us to get information about students who might be in need. And then finally, we want to also make sure, like many of us, we're accustomed to getting personalized messages from the hospital, from Amazon, from different vendors that we deal with. We want to be able to provide that same type of experience for our students. If students were looking to transfer to the University of Michigan or Western Michigan University, we want to provide them with specific information about those schools or any other support services that would actually be specific to the needs that they had as a student. Before I turn it over today to two of our power users who are going to talk to us a little bit about how they're using TargetX to better serve our students, I thought it was important to highlight. This morning I received an email from our Director of Advising and Success Coaching, and it really highlighted the power of TargetX. She gave me a really good example of how we're using TargetX across departments to better serve our students. In that our coaches were actually looking at students who had been withdrawing from courses over the last couple of weeks. And there had been an increased consistency in the number of students who actually said that what was contributing to their need to withdraw were mental health issues. And we were able to provide that list to our dean of students and one of our counselors to actually have a care team outreach for those students. So that's just one example of how we're using TargetX to better serve our students. But I'm now going to turn it over to Grace Fama, who's our manager of our success coaching, and she'll give us a little bit more insight into how TargetX is helping us better serve students at a larger scale.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hearns. Good evening, everyone. As the Success Coach Manager, I've been so excited that we are now able to create real-time reports for the indicators that allow us to intervene during the semester rather than waiting until the end of the semester when a student hasn't been successful. Next slide, please. We are bringing in data from across our various student information systems, which advisors and coaches and many staff simply did not have access to in the past. What you're seeing on the screen right now is an example of the Winter 2021 Retention Campaign dashboard that our success coaches used for reaching out to students who had not yet enrolled for the winter term. So the table on the far left, we could see how many students they had already called and who they still needed to contact. With the chart in the middle, we could see at a glance what percentage of students were enrolled for the next term. And the chart on the right showed us the results of our text message campaign. Next slide. This is an example of the advising dashboard. With this tool, each advisor can filter by their name and drill down to see, for example, which of their students withdrew from a course last week and follow up with those students to just check and see what's going on, what they might need at this point. With the table in the middle, advisors can also see which of their students have not met with an advisor in a specified amount of time, say 6 months, and send direct invitations to those students to set up an advising appointment. What we're really trying to do here is change student behaviors, make them act quickly. The table on the far right is showing us which students received a faculty letter of concern or an early alert. With TargetX, we can now do more outreach to those students who have received an early alert and follow up to make sure that they are getting the resources that they need to be successful in the course. Next slide. Now that we have TargetX in place, we can do true case management. Advisors and success coaches are now directly assigned as success team members to students in TargetX and can create list views of their students to easily send emails and text messages. From the list view, They can also filter and sort their lists on a variety of criteria, which is especially useful for managing outreach campaigns and other initiatives. A lot of what I've shown you so far has been the bird's eye view with reports and dashboards, but TargetX puts the individual student front and center. Now I'm going to introduce Nikki Lee, our academic advisor for advanced technologies, to share some more specific examples of how TargetX has not only increased her efficiency, but allows her to build relationships with students who might otherwise slip through the cracks.
Thanks, Grace. All right. Can everybody, can we go to the next slide? Awesome. All right, thanks for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I wanted to take some time to share with you all the impact that TargetX is having on my outreach to students and how I serve students. Well, I've always advised a very specific group of students. Like Grace said, I serve as an advisor in advanced technology, so those students in welding, HVAC, automotive. And I've built rapport with many of these students, have great relationships with students, but I have not had access to a system that's really allowing for this true case management approach. Prior to TargetX, my advising colleagues in all areas, and I really only had the capacity to serve students who first reached out to us, and it was a completely reactive approach. On the next few slides, this slide included, I want to highlight the ways that TargetX has really been allowing students to be reached more efficiently, more effectively, and most importantly, more proactively. So I kind of walking through my day a little bit and how I use TargetX. I start my day using my dashboards like Grace explained, where I can drill down, choose my specific students. Julie Lee is me there. Nikki, Julie, I have two names. So I wanted to highlight the ways that I start this. So I first pull up this dashboard. I'm going to review first thing in the morning any new students that in the last 24 hours have withdrawn from a course, need to set up an appointment with an advisor, or have an early alert from a faculty member. I start my outreach with a text message to check in on that student directly. So I like to first reach students where they are, and then I always follow up with an email that has specific personalized resources, and I'll show some examples of that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So I can also use TargetX to create a task list that's connected to a student's record specifically. And these are both tasks for myself related to an action needed for a student or a follow-up that I need to do with a student, as well as tasks assigned to me. So some tasks that I have there are some different, this is a real list. So these are some examples of whether it's a course substitution or it's sending academic forgiveness form over to student records, whatever it is, whatever follow-up action I need to do directly related to serving a student. Tasks assigned to me can be a referral sent to me from a faculty in the system. It can be an email outreach that came through general advising that the director is assigned to me. It's a really efficient way to keep track of all these things that students need to get that wraparound support from a team approach. Next slide, please. So I think, in my opinion, the most useful tool so far for me in TargetX has really been the list views. And Grace mentioned this briefly. This essentially is the ability to create lists for specific groups of students and proactively reach out, connect with these students, and it has had a significant increase in the amount of students with whom I can connect and build relationships with every day. So the list view is amazing. I used to kind of do this manually in the advanced technologies area. I always used a case management approach the best I could, but I built these spreadsheets. I would download rosters. I would put them into Excel spreadsheets. I would use mail merges. It took me a lot of time to accomplish not a very large task. And now with the list view, I can set the criteria and I can pull everything that I need in there and start taking it. It takes me 90 seconds. So it's really amazing. It's just that much faster and that many more students that get contact from me. So when I first started using the list, I tried to think of what list I wanted to create to get started in this, to start my use of this, to start practicing in this system. And the first list I created was I wanted to create a list that would allow me to update and create customized academic plans for students. So I set the criteria organized by those students that are assigned to me, are part of my success team, that have 45 or more credits. So they should be approaching graduation. And I had it organized by program. And I thought this would be a good way to start as I work towards my efforts in increasing student completion in advanced technology. So when I took action on this list, it really allowed me to build those customized plans, like I said. Going through the list and auditing these students individually, I identified students that were approaching graduation. Maybe they were in the final term, and that prompted me to reach out to send them an application for graduation, or to help them correct a course. You know, if I'm reaching out early and they simply need to change the catalog that they're in, or they need to add a late starting course so they really can graduate that semester. I identified students that were taking courses that weren't part of their program on file. Not necessarily anything wrong with that. They simply needed to request to change their program so that what they were taking is matching their program. So I think it has increased the amount of like accurate numbers we have of students and programs. It's going to be huge for that. I've identified students who haven't met with an advisor and clearly need some help. So I come across students that, you know, have no history of meeting with an advisor, clearly have been self-advising. Maybe they're off in their sequence of courses and I can intervene now, even though they didn't reach out to me. And that just wasn't possible before this system. So it really is amazing. I identified students that were clearly working on transfer coursework tied to some of our articulation agreements. So that prompted me to connect them with the transfer resources or send them specific information about the school they're wanting to transfer to, connections to advisors at those schools, et cetera. So in this effort, I've received amazing feedback from students, so grateful for the outreach, particularly the ones that I've never met before. So these are, you know, I was realizing just how many students were falling through the cracks, if you will, because they didn't come to us for advising. I'm taking it to them. And so I'm building new relationships over the last few months that have been pretty powerful. Next slide, please. So this is some examples of like emails that I send. So I have the ability to create templates that are still customized because I can customize a student's first name, their program, but I can send this information. This is an example email. I know the text is kind of small, so I'll give you the gist. Basically, I'm telling a student, hey, I went in, I made you a customized plan. It's just a draft, but it's all the classes you have left in what order they should be taken in order to complete your degree or certificate. Check it out. Registration's coming up, you know, March 10th. Here's the link to the class schedule, you know, be ready. And so students already, you know, my goal is to get 100% of students on a customized plan like this, and building these for students even before they ask for them has been really huge. So I can identify the students' courses, build a plan, and send this email, you know, in a roughly 4 to 5 minutes per student. And that just wasn't possible before because I didn't even know who the students were. So this was really great. I've sent as much communication and pertinent information to students who have not reached out to me as those who have. And this, like I said, just wasn't possible. So TargetX also allows us, I can send these text messages and emails right in the system. So it's tied to a student's record, to their report. I can see all of the communication that has gone on. I'm going to highlight that in a minute, but the box there, it says last open February 16th. That's circled, boxed in there in red. When I send email communication from TargetX, I can see when a student interacted with it, whether or not they opened it, when they opened it. So this allows us to keep track of the students that, you know, maybe they're not answering their email. Is there a better way to reach them? You know, if I run a list of my students who aren't opening their emails, can I send them a text? Can I call them? So it really is a lot of really useful information. Next slide, please. So like I said, sending messages, sending communication directly through the system, because this is a centralized hub, this wraparound support that we provide has, and when I say we provide, I mean folks that are in different areas that honestly were previously siloed, what folks are doing in coaching, what a recruiter's doing for a new student. We don't always see those communications because they were in our they're in our outbox. These are personal emails with students. Now these are all in one spot. So this is a great example of one of my favorite students, Elena. So I connected her with a coach. She wanted some more support of someone that she could check in with, work on time management with. So I connected her with the coach in our team, Anthony Webster, and he was working with her. So she needed some support for courses, specifically for her English course, wanting a tutor. You can see here, Anthony connected her with a tutor, but this view right here, I have access to. So I can see the communication that went back and forth between Anthony, the connection to those resources. So when I, follow up with Elena in a couple of weeks, I can say, did you get connected with that tutor? How's that going? What are your meetings? How are your meetings going with Anthony? Let's talk about what we need next as we plan courses. So, the removal of those silos or us working together to provide that students really feel that wraparound support. And because I can do this more efficiently, I can serve way more students. So I'm really excited. So that is all. If I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
If you could bring us to the next slide, please. And so overall, we just want to give you kind of a snapshot view of, how we're building more meaningful relationship with students through TargetX. Our goal was really to focus on increasing student success. Our advisors and coaches are using TargetX really to help build more relationships with students to get students to the finish line. Our goal is to get more completed. It's improving how we work so we can better serve students and really communicating with students in a way that they actually communicate, mobile phones, email, really reaching them with messages that are important for them. Some of our next steps that are going to be extremely important is to expand the number of users so we can build stronger relationships. Our advisors have extremely important relationships with our students, but in addition, our faculty and additional staff, as well as integrating more additional services and support. We know it's extremely important to build a sense of belongingness for our students. So things like in the writing center and really engaging students in student activities and including all of that in our system, important next steps for us with TargetX. I'd like to say thank you to Grace as well as Nikki for presenting with us today. Our Director of Coaching and Advising, Ashley Wisnowski and Mika McCaskill really helped the finish line with some of our work today, as well as really getting this off and implemented. And a very special thanks to Kathy Curry and Laura Crane, who took the lead and put a lot of hard work into really helping us get to where we're at, although we still have some more big steps to go with TargetX. Thanks to everybody.
Are there any questions of EVP Hearns or Grace or Nikki?
This is Vice Chair Davis. First of all, wow, that was fantastic. Yeah, she laid out a very detailed process, and I love her enthusiasm. That really helped make this a lot simpler task to deal with, and I commend her efforts in getting it done, versus a spreadsheet to this TargetX software. Now, fill me in. Have we been always using TargetX? Is this something new that I missed that class of when it was presented to the board? Help me out.
TargetX is a new system that we recently implemented. It was probably about, before COVID, a while before COVID, that we actually came to the board talking about purchasing a student relationship management system. We'll call it a CRM system. So this is newly implemented to us as a college. TargetX is.
So I would imagine that that there was no pushback, because some people, they get caught up in, oh, well, this is the way I've always done it, kind of resistant to change. So I would like to think that they all saw it the same way that Vicki had, that it was a much easier tool to access that students, the student database as a whole, and getting these messages to them to help them stay on track with their classes. And then with that, their ongoing training update so that all the advisors and the counselors can be on the same page on how to effectively use this tool?
Yeah, we actually are doing, not advising, we're actually doing training and drop-in training at least twice a week right now. So the training is ongoing. Grace has been doing an awesome job of doing one-pagers on different things. So, I mean, it's been very well received, and it does help that we have a team of people who are excited and can actually kind of be cheerleaders on how we can use this to better help students. That's made a really big difference.
And it sounds like the students that have been contacted through this platform, the response rate has been much higher than it has in the past, right?
Especially because of the texting. I think the texting's made a really, really big difference. That's where we're really seeing a lot of response, because that's, you know, kind of what students use, a lot of younger people.
Exactly.
From a communication standpoint.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That sounds really good.
I have a few questions.
Yes, please, Ruth.
How many advisors are using it right now?
All of the advisors are using it right now, but I think everybody's probably still at different levels of training in regards to how actively they're using it and some of the tricks and things that Nikki found. But all of the advisors are using TargetX right now.
And what do we do when you find out from this system that a student has dropped a class? Is it too late, or is there some intervention, or do you try to get them back in class, or?
Well, it depends on the reason a student withdrew from the class. You know, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation about the mental health, that was a good example of us seeing a trend where those students just needed a referral to someplace else. And a student might need to be referred to register for a late start class. So the system allows us to see more specifically what the individual needs of students are, instead of us making kind of big sweeping assumptions that usually were probably incorrect, because there's so much diversity among our students and what those needs are.
Do we have a sense of how many early alert letters go out, maybe this semester or in any given semester?
I'm going to ask Grace if she knows that. I know it's been a big increase because we really were pushing it this semester because of COVID. But I don't know if Grace, do you know how many alerts you might be seeing? I know there was a big increase in them.
No.
Yeah, I don't have that on hand right now. And maybe Kathy Curry would actually know, because we've been bringing those in. Those were all in Banner previous to moving them into TargetX. So in addition to our early alerts, we've also implemented a faculty staff referral form. So that's when students are having just additional things come up. And with that particular early alert process, we had about 130 to 140 those come in the fall semester, and already this winter semester we've had 80 faculty staff referrals. And the early alerts is somewhere in the hundreds. We typically receive hundreds over the course of the semester.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think the key thing is that the early alerts are now followed up on, because the system has, you know, a more collaborative feature. People can follow up with both the student as well as the faculty to kind of have a kind of full feedback loop with whatever the situation might be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So we have about 1,400 approximately. I mean, I can give you the exact number later.
No, that's just a range. I don't need the exact number. Yeah. Thank you.
Chair.
Yes, please.
Just to, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who presented and thank the board for approving TargetX when you did. I believe it was last year, or right last year.
Year
ago. So what you asked for, what the board asked for at that time, is that you wanted a report on TargetX before you approved it to continue. And so that's what this is about. So that, just so that you know, more to come. So we're just responding. It's good that the board knows this, but we're responding to a request of the board for more information on TargetX as we move forward.
Gotcha. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
President Blanco. I forgot.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you, EVP Hearns and Grace and Nikki and Kathy. EVP Blakey, Michigan Future for Frontliners and Reconnect update, please.
Good evening. Can you see my screen?
We can. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about there's two new state scholarship programs. So the two new states of Michigan scholarship programs are Futures for Frontliners and Reconnect. Futures for Frontliners is for frontline workers who have no degree, either an associate or bachelor's. It's for workers who had to work when the state first shut down for COVID. So they had to work a minimum of 20 hours per week for 11 of the 13 weeks between April 1st and June 30th. The first semester that these students could use the scholarship was winter of 21, and the deadline for applying was December 31st, 2020. For Reconnect, it's for any Michigan resident who's age 25 or older, who also has no degree, and their first semester of enrollment they can use a scholarship is summer of 21, and it will be an ongoing program. So for both programs, for both scholarships, there's a three-step process. The student applies at the state website. During that application process, the student selects the community college that they plan to enroll. Both these scholarships are only for community colleges. They complete the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid for each academic year they plan to enroll, and they have to complete their financial aid file with the college of their choosing. And the third step is to apply and enroll at their community college. The student must be pursuing a Title IV or federal financial aid eligible program. So how are Reconnect and Futures for Frontliners, how are they the same? They're the same in that the student must complete FAFSA and meet the eligibility requirements for federal aid. The student must be pursuing a financial aid eligible program. For both scholarships, the scholarship covers only courses that are in the program of study. So whatever program the student's taking, only courses in that program are covered. And tuition, technology fee, and contact hour fee is what's covered, not specific course fees. So for instance, if for someone who's taking ceramics, the clay fee would not be covered, and that's a specific course fee. Both these scholarships pay the in-district tuition rate. So what that means is if we have an out-of-district student, they would be responsible for covering the difference between the in-district and the out-of-district tuition that they're being charged. Both of these programs are what's referred to as a last dollar program. So what it does is it pays for any remaining tuition or fees after Pell or other tuition-only funds pay. So it's not extra money for the student. So the student applies for financial aid. If they're eligible for Pell and Pell pays all their tuition and fees, they would not get any Future for Frontliner dollars. If it pays part of their tuition, it covers, Frontliners will cover the rest. Or maybe perhaps they're not eligible for Pell, but they're eligible for Title IV financial aid, then the Futures for Frontliners would pay all their tuition and fees at the in-district rate. For both these programs, the student must be enrolled in a minimum of 6 credits in program courses. They also must, to maintain their eligibility, they must complete 12 credits in the first, every 12 months of their enrollment, they have to complete 12 credits. They also have to maintain a cumulative grade point average or GPA of 2.0 for the courses that are in their program while they're a frontliner or Reconnect student. So their prior grades or prior SAP satisfactory academic progress status is not considered. It only kind of starts being calculated at the point they become a frontliner or a Reconnect student. And the students will have 4 years to complete their program. So how are these two scholarships different? First, as I mentioned, the frontliner students must enroll during calendar year 2021. So they either have to start winter, summer, or fall of this year. Reconnect is ongoing. Their first semester will be summer 2021, but then it's supposed to continue after that. Frontliner students cannot have a defaulted federal loan. So if they have defaulted federal loan, they have to get that back into good status before they could get the Frontliner scholarship. However, for Reconnect students, they may have a defaulted federal loan and still be able to get the scholarship. Frontliner students are not eligible for Reconnect. So it doesn't stop them from applying, but the state has made this really clear. So if I've already been approved to be a Frontliner student, if I turn around and apply for Reconnect, the state's going to say I'm not eligible. So again, as I mentioned, the future for Frontliners, the application deadline was December 31st. There was 4,901 students, or individuals, I should say, who applied to the state to be a frontliner, who specified WCC as their college choice. When a student or when an individual specifies the community college, our financial aid staff are able to go in and pull the data down on those individuals only, just the individuals who specified Washtenaw as their college choice. So of those 4,900 that applied, there was 3,332 who were approved by the state as eligible. So that meant they had the job classification, they met worked the number of weeks, worked the number of hours, that all those criteria I talked about earlier to be a frontliner. Of those over 3,300, there's 1,315 who are enrolled at Washtenaw this winter. Remember, students could also begin enrollment in summer or fall, and so we know some of those students are planning to be those later enrollees. All students, no matter of that 4,901, all students receive customized communications through TargetX. So depending on what their status was, if they were a new student, an applicant, totally brand new, a continuing, all those communications could be totally customized through TargetX because of the information that we had on the student. We also did a lot of different support for the frontliners, and we continue to do this support. But our recruitment area hosted over 70 sessions with St. Joseph Hospital. So with our partnership with AVP Tucker and Dean Greaves, there was a lot of St. Joe was identifying staff that they wanted to help kind of upgrade in terms of positions that they may have had at the hospital. We had individualized information sessions explaining how frontliners worked, because certainly most of that staff were eligible for frontliners. We had information sessions morning, afternoon, and evenings to accommodate all the different shifts. We've also had our financial aid staff working individually with all the frontliner students who need assistance with their financial aid status. So maybe they had a defaulted loan status, and financial aid would work with that individual on a step-by-step basis of how to get their loan into good status so they would be eligible for the scholarship. So of the 1,300 students who are approved to be frontliners, we have 688 are continuing, so they were enrolled fall semester and continued on to winter. 351 are re-enrollees, so they previously attended Washtenaw, but they were not enrolled for fall, and now they're back enrolled with us. And 276 were brand new to Washtenaw, so the first time they're attending Washtenaw was winter 2021. So of that 1,315 that, again, were approved at the state level, we have 930 who are actually receiving the scholarship this winter. And that's because those students have completed their financial aid file. They're enrolled in at least 6 program credits. And so we're continuing every week to get more students. They're like picking up some late start classes, or they're finishing up their financial aid files. So that number I expect will grow before the end of the semester. 648 of those students have actually gotten some frontliner dollars. That's what we call those last dollar programs. So maybe they had a little bit of Pell, and we added the frontliner to finish up their payment. They're paying for their tuition and fees, or perhaps they were not eligible for Pell and they got total scholarship covering their tuition and fees at the in-district rate. We have 282 students who their tuition and fees were totally covered by other aid, so they don't have actual frontliner dollars posted, but they are still considered frontliner students when we will report those to the state. So for that $520,000 that's been posted on student accounts, and again, that number will be continue to grow through the end of the semester. Our next step is to post that student scholarship information on the state scholarship site. Our financial aid staff will do that. And that's for processing and for the college to get reimbursed for those funds. And I will tell you that, you know, I feel like we're on a plane and the state is kind of building the wings as we're doing this, because the state is still determining the rules on a lot of things. We're at the beginning of the semester still figuring out what are the frontliner posting rules if a student has TIP, which is another state scholarship program. And again, that's after hundreds of thousands of dollars had already been posted on student accounts. And now they're talking about, well, we're not sure if a student withdraws during the semester, maybe we're not going to reimburse for that. We're not, you know, again, that's not, I don't think we should be doing those rules after the semester's already started, but the state is still going around and around in terms of how the schools are going to be reimbursed for these funds. So let's look at who our frontliners are. The ones who are enrolled this semester, 64% are female. They have an average age of 30. 36% are male with an average age of 29. What's interesting is that 48% of those students have out-of-district residency. Remember, the out-of-district students are responsible for paying the difference between in-district and out-district tuition unless it's covered by other aid. And many are from counties with a community college. We have students from Oakland County, Wayne County, Jackson County that are all pursuing programs with us, which I think speaks to the quality of our programming. So again, as I mentioned, for the Reconnect Scholarship, students who are at least 25, they can apply at the state's website. That's how they start that process. They have to have lived in Michigan for a year, and that first semester will be summer 2021. So far, so the application went live on Groundhog Day on February 2nd. So just kind of 20 days in, we've already had 2,177 individuals who have applied with the state and indicated that they plan to attend Washtenaw. Right now, 1,983 of those are eligible. So we've already had 194 frontliner students applied to be a Reconnect. And so they get notified by the state that, sorry, they're not eligible because they are a frontliner student already. 680 of those students are current. They've been enrolled at Washtenaw in the last 2 years, so they're already eligible to enroll for the summer semester. 420 are prior students, and I anticipate that both of these scholarships will allow students who perhaps attended in the past, perhaps had some academic difficulties, lost their financial aid, and now are being able to come back with a clean slate. 541 of the students have already started the application process. So they've applied for winter, summer, fall 21, or even winter. We've already started receiving applications for the winter 22 semester. And 342 are totally new. They haven't started the application process. And again, we're reaching out to all of these individuals with customized TargetX communications on kind of what their next step in the process is. For Reconnect, we have some virtual town halls planned for March 8th and March 10th, one in the morning, one in the evening. We'll also have a variety of scheduling of one-to-one meetings so individuals can come in all during different times of the day and meet with a recruitment team member to go over what the process is. We've also we have a web page, we have social media posts. I met with the superintendents last week. They were very interested in supporting staff in their districts. And so they were sent a really nice communication that they can put in any of their newsletters that had links to all the information on the college website. So the other things that we're doing is thinking about all the different programming that we can do to support these students. We talk about credit for prior learning and work experience. We have course scheduling that's supportive of working adults. And we're increasing our wraparound one-on-one support from recruiters, advisors, coaches, financial aid staff, learning commons staff, and others in terms of really putting our arms around these students to help them come and enroll and be successful. Thank you.
Questions kept coming to me during your presentation, but you kept answering them, Linda. But one that I want to ask you is the state rulemaking that's going on frontliners. Is that legislative or administrative? Who's making the rules?
There's it's Treasury and it's Leo, and so that's part of the difficulty is because the frontliners is being driven by Leo, and the Reconnect is being driven by kind of Treasury, because Treasury is where most of the scholarship programs have been. And so they were modeling Reconnect on the state of Tennessee. And again, you know, I just got a handbook like this week. And so again, and a lot of the handbook had like questions, pages and pages of questions. It was like, we're still debating this question. We're still debating this question. And so it's and that, I'm telling you, I have to call Rose and like scream sometimes. So because, you know, all of a sudden we get these emails from the person at the state, and Doug Ross is connected to both of these scholarship programs. And they just make these statements that they don't know what they're talking about. It's like, if the student withdraws, you're not going to be able to bill for us. Okay, that totally changes how the whole process. That doesn't work like that for any other state scholarship programs. And so again, in my opinion, you have people that aren't aware of how financial aid works, how this processing works, and they just kind of start throwing things out. So there's been many meetings with school officials and with financial aid directors. And so again, it's this kind of moving target that kind of keeps getting updated because they didn't bring those individuals in early before they started kind of laying out some of the rules.
And thanks to Linda, I was able to share the concerns that the financial aid directors have regarding this payment with the presidents, with the MCCA. They sent something out that actually Linda helped me write. But what we don't know is, well, you know, if someone receives an award, and it says you have to be in 6 hours, so that the student receives the award. You know, student drops 3 credits. Who pays? That student now is responsible because all of a sudden they're not eligible for that program anymore. So, like, the devil's in the details. But it's a great, you know, it's a great opportunity. It's a great concept. It's got a lot of people involved, but the devil's in the details. So that's the best I can say.
And I think even the funding for this program is because, I mean, we were having to do reports like every 2 weeks of how many, because they didn't anticipate, I don't think, how many students would apply for this program, how many students would be eligible for the funding. And so I think that they've been a little kind of overwhelmed in terms of the response.
Rick Landau?
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments, and maybe Linda and Rose can tell me if I'm terribly off base here, but you know, I was thinking the other day, if you're a student under 19, you can enroll at WTMC and graduate with an associate's degree for $0. It's free. If with these scholarship programs, if you're over 25, you can essentially do a very similar thing. You can essentially go to college for free. But if you're between the ages of 19 and 25, you seem to have to be required to pay tuition, fill out a FAFSA form, get Pell Grants. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just a comment. If you look at this administrative superstructure, it's simply absurd. I mean, when you think of the administrative cost that could be saved, why don't we just make community college free, do it the same way we do it for K-12, and, you know, probably save, you know, $5 million in administrative expenses alone. I mean, am I terribly off base on that, or is this just crazy town?
I don't think you're off base, but if I may say that, you know, the free conversation about free college, community college is going around. But no, I don't think so. And you know what? Our employees had to do this all manually.
Right.
They didn't get, so when you talk about administrative costs, they didn't even have a Christmas vacation. They didn't have anything on top of their other jobs.
Well, and think about what the students have to do to be able to, I mean, it was disturbing to me on that one slide that Linda showed about all the applicants versus the eventual yield that we get. I mean, how many of these folks don't have time, you know, to fill out the FAFSA, check, you know, run through all of the, you know, checklists on all of these different scholarship programs, figure out which one they qualify for. I mean, it's, you know, it's almost a full-time job trying to, if you don't have the money, you know, if you can write a check, this is all no problem. But if you don't have the money, you know, you've got to be, forgive me, a little bit of a Philadelphia lawyer to be able to even figure out how to navigate these systems. I mean, when I see Linda Blakey frustrated with how to navigate the system, I realize that we have now reached an insane level of regulation and complication. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. And I just hope this state and this country gets some sense in it and realizes that, you know, just pay for it, stop making people suffer. You know, I mean, all these people who are getting educations are going to be paying taxes, more taxes than they're paying now. They pay for themselves. I mean, it's just the lunacy of our higher educational financing system is just crazy. And don't get me started about having to pay $14,000 at the University of Michigan for virtual instruction, but there we go.
Would anyone else care to comment?
I've got a question.
David?
Or a couple questions. First off, and I raised this when we first discussed this, are food service workers and grocery store employees, are they considered frontline workers?
Yes.
Have we engaged, and I noticed we're doing those 2, open houses, outreach things, meetings in March. Have we reached out to those communities? Because it seems, it just strikes me that they could be rich in potential people that would qualify if they applied. And I'm just wondering if we're reaching out into those communities and trying to bring them into those March open houses and maybe get them on board.
Right. So remember that when you asked about grocery store workers being frontliners, that program, the last date that a student could apply was December 31st. So the state shut that application down. So
They
now
reconnect.
So as long as the student is 25 or older, they can be a reconnect. And in fact, the state said, which I don't know how they're going to do this, but the state said any student that applied for, and you can see there was a big difference between who applied to be a frontliner and who actually got approved to be a frontliner, that they're supposed to take all those students who were not approved for frontliner, and if they're 25 or older, move them automatically over to reconnect. I'm not sure if they're actually going to do that, but that's what they've committed to do so that those students don't fall through the cracks.
Okay. That doesn't exactly address my question. If we're doing any marketing outreach to those communities. We're
doing outreach to a lot of different, to all kinds of businesses on the social media, to the school districts, to, you know, a lot of employers have individuals that are over 25. And so it's not limited to any kind of specific job. So, yes.
Have we reached out to those, like the grocery store chains, Kroger's, Meijer, Bush's?
No, but I can follow up with recruitment.
No, that's a good idea, though.
And then my other question, when I saw that these numbers are approximate, 4,900 applied for the front line and 3,300 were approved. So there's the difference by the state. So that there's a difference of 1,600 there who didn't get the approval by the state. Part of your last response suggests that those that are over 25 from that group are being kicked into the reconnect. But do we know who those people are? Because it strikes me, because if they indicated they want WCC, and if they didn't qualify for this program, it strikes me that those are people that have already demonstrated an interest in WCC. If we can reach out to them and find what it would take to get them on board as students, that could be a viable group of recruits, students that we could bring in if we can find out who they are, what they need to get on board at WCC. But it seems, I don't know if we have access to those names.
Yes, so, right, so when I said all with the underline, all those students we're communicating with. Whether
Great.
they were eligible or not, we're communicating with them. We're
Great.
talking with them, we're working with them, helping them fill out the application, helping them fill out the FAFSA, because they can just go through and, go through and do the process with whether they get that scholarship with the state or not. So we're communicating with them no matter what their status is.
I mean, if we get even of that 1,600, if we get half of them end up enrolling, that's like a 0.75% kick in our enrollment.
Right. Remember, some of those students are probably already our students, because there's a big proportion of those students who are already our student. And I think that was a little bit of frustration with the students, because they assumed that they were just going to get more money. Like, oh, I'm already getting Pell, I'll get some more money. But again, with last dollar, they don't get any extra money. Just make sure that their tuition and fees are paid.
Doesn't Pell cover non-tuition?
It covers educational expenses. So yes, if they have full Pell, then that covers all their tuition and fees. Plus they'll have other money for books and educational expenses like driving and transportation and housing and things like that.
Any other questions of EVP Blakey?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please, Ruth.
So we've got all this, 1,300 new students with a whole new set of constraints. Do you need more staff, Linda? How you doing?
Oh, I could tell you stories. So remember, those are not all,
what do you need?
all on top of our, because remember some of those are students, but certainly our recruitment, admissions, our financial aid staff have been really, really stressed to the seams.
Yeah.
Of all the different processing that's, because a lot of these students need hand-holding. They may have been in the educational system before, they maybe weren't successful. And so there's a lot of steps to kind of get them on track. And so, but I have great staff that are troopers, and we're working through the process. So
I'm just, curious as to what you need. It's a thought.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to monthly reports. We've got personnel recommendation in front of us. Tab B in your packet. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the monthly personnel recommendations as submitted. Do I hear a motion?
A move to approve.
And a second? Is there support? Is there any discussion?
Of course, I have a question. The new manager of learning design, is that someone who works under Peter Vasily?
Yes.
Okay. And there was an open position, but it's been retitled. Is that correct? It was the instructional creative online person. That was the open position.
Tim, I believe it has.
Okay. But it's not new.
It's not a new position.
Correct.
It's not a new position. Okay. That was my only question.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Vanessa, would you please call the roll?
Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis,
Yes.
Treasurer DeVarty. Oh, he stepped away. Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher, yes.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming, yes.
Trustee Landau,
Landau, yes.
Trustee McKnight Morton.
McKnight Morton, yes.
The motion carries. Thank you. Financial reports. Tab C, The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees receive the financial reports for January 2021 as follows. General Fund, Deferred Maintenance Fund, Capital Fund, and Combined Schedule of Investments, all funds. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's support. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Vanessa, would you please call the roll?
Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis,
Yes.
Treasurer DeVarty,
DeVarty, yes.
Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher, yes.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming, yes.
Trustee Landau,
Landau, yes.
Trustee McKnight Morton.
McKnight Morton, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Facilities Development Report. EVP Johnson, please.
Thanks, Chair Milliken. I just wanted to point out a couple of projects for the board. Our two large projects on the first page there. The Morris Lawrence renovation project, that bid process is going nicely. We had 8 large bidders that were interested in it. They participated in the walkthrough that was required. Just to note for the board, we did work hard, given the nature of this project, in that we have a rather narrow window to complete a significant amount of work from January through June of 22. The liquidated damages section of our contract, we did up the ante, so to speak, to put the penalties at a much higher rate if the contractor misses the mark. It's not uncommon for those kind of provisions for this kind of a tight timetable contract. We fully anticipate that we'll get strong bids in. They are due on March 12th, and we are hoping to bring a recommendation to the board at the March meeting to approve both the contract to proceed with the construction project and also to the first reading on the contractor recommendation for that. Secondly, the Student Center renovation project, also a very large project. We have had ongoing meetings with Fishbeck, the architectural and engineering firm. We had a very long meeting the other week to review their assessment of the various HVAC systems that might be suitable for that building. We are landing on one as being the most likely outcome. We're kind of doing the risk assessment on that. And then from that, we will start to define the requirements to go out to bid. And again, that we think that we'll be going out to bid this summer and coming before the board on that project at the September board meeting. So a lot of deep planning going on and work going on in those two large projects. And those were my 2 main points I wanted to cover, Chair Milliken.
Thank you. Any questions of Bill Johnson? Remarks by members of the Board of Trustees. Let me tell you first that a couple of weeks ago, President Belanca and several of us trustees participated in a virtual National Legislative Summit. This is an annual affair hosted by the American Association of Community Colleges and Association of Community College Trustees. And it's a good forum. It was a better forum when it was in person, and you could actually interact with other trustees and leadership from colleges around the country. But it gave us a chance, in our case, to have some contact with Senator Peters and Senator staff from Senator Stabenow's office. This was right on top of the impeachment hearings in Washington. So a lot of the legislators were community colleges were lower on their lists that day, but Gary Peters gave us about half an hour of his time before he had to leave to go back to the floor. So we were grateful for that chance to discuss issues with them. We also had a lot of members of the 117th Congress, including Education Committee leaders from both sides of the aisle, and some policy experts. The association did a nice job of scheduling speakers, and this was over a 3-day period. And so you could go in and out of it, but you had a nice menu of who the experts were and what you had a chance to listen to. But one of the common themes was around supporting students who've been hit by the pandemic, and to talk about programs to ensure that students in need receive aid for tuition-related costs and emergency expenses. And our Washtenaw Community College Foundation Student Emergency Fund is a case in point. So we were very proud of that, the fact that that's up and operating and doing a lot of good. And one of the highlights of the day was First Lady Jill Biden. She's a community college educator herself. She was a keynote speaker, and she discussed the president's commitment to partnering with community colleges and building a better future for everyone. So that was a nice bow on the time that we spent. So we were pleased to be a part of it and to come home inspired to do more good work. Are there any other trustees that would care to speak? President Belanca, do you have words of wisdom for us this evening?
Of course I do. Well,
thank you.
2 things. I just want to remind us all that we are in a pandemic. And I know we don't need reminding because we're in it every day. Sometimes we forget that because we're so used to this now that people are still dealing with issues while they're trying to do their jobs, while they're trying to do their studies, while they're just trying to live their life. And I just want to always keep that in our forefront because I myself sometimes forget and think, well, why aren't we doing this faster? Or why aren't we doing this better? Or, come on, let's get going. But we are in a pandemic. And, it's important for all of us to realize that. I'd like to tell you a story about a student, a graduate actually. His name is Will Glover. And you'll see Will Glover's photo on the record and Launch Magazine. He's our star this quarter. But the story about Will Glover is his college education was cut short after his father's untimely death. And with the ensuing financial troubles that his family experienced, Will dropped out of the 4-year university he was attending and started working in restaurants, which much of that salary going directly to pay for the thousands of dollars that he owed or debt at the 4-year universities that had not even resulted in a degree. But he knew he had to get back to school, but he wasn't in any hurry to go further in debt. So he enrolled at WCC to pursue an interest he had in video production. Fast forward a few years. And before I even tell you this, I'm going to tell you this later. Fast forward a few years, Glover earned an associate's in digital video production from WCC and is now an award-winning producer for Detroit Public Television. We learn about our successful alumni in many different ways, but I'd like a little credit for finding Will because I was interviewed by Will for a DP TV show. And, while you're talking, you ask some questions. And he said, oh, you know what? By the way, I'm a WCC graduate. And that made me very, very proud because he was so good at his job. And then he told me a little bit more about his backstory. And I just knew that I had to tell people about him because there's no one better story to tell than the one where a student really achieves a great career. And he credits Matt Zacharias, his faculty member, for all of the mentoring and coaching that he did to bring him to his success. So congratulations to Matt, to everyone that's helped Will Glover, and especially Will Glover. Speaking of success, I'm happy to announce that our Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society chapter was recently recognized with a REACH Award from the National Organization for Increasing its Acceptance Rate. We obviously want as many students as possible to achieve and receive the benefits of Phi Theta Kappa membership. So we're all thrilled that for those that were accepted and that our program is continuing to expand. You know, Phi Theta Kappa is really a good opportunity for our students to have on their resumes. And lastly, but definitely not least, our Jack Kent Cook semifinalists. 3 Washtenaw Community College students are among 406 semifinalists nationwide for the prestigious Cook Foundation undergraduate scholarship worth up to $120,000. Jesse Bishop, Umang Bojani, and Abdul Zito are on the 2021 semifinalist selected by the Jack Cook Foundation from a pool of 1,500 applicants attending 398 community college in 44 states and the District of Columbia. The scholarship supports exceptional community college students seeking to complete a bachelor's degree. A WCC student has earned the Cook Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship for 3 consecutive years. So we had 3 students, with Ali Kermasha winning in 2020, Ahmed Galib in 2019, Paula Salazar in 2018. The college had 2 winners, Fatuma Abdullah and Idisa and Suzanne Spence in 2013. The award winners for 2021 will be announced in April. An average of 53 students have been awarded these awards over the years. So we're very, very proud of them and faculty and staff that support them.
That's great to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very good.
We are all pleased. Thank you very much.
Yes.
We have several items of discussion ahead of us in new business this evening. First is single mode fiber installation contract. CIO Kruger, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Chair Milliken, for the chance to speak briefly about the single mode fiber installation contract. So hopefully this will sound at least somewhat familiar to some of you. As referenced in November, when we discussed the network infrastructure upgrade project, the fiber optic cable plant has not been updated and needs to be. In order for the new network equipment to function properly and also to prevent network failures, latency, and a sluggish network experience, this is a particular priority. Due to the growing amounts of data and with the additional use of video for on-campus and remote operations, it is all the more important. The major goals of this project include the following 2 goals. To increase the reliability of the network and decrease the possibility of failures and interruption to campus operations. And 2, to provide the infrastructure on which to build and enhance our online offerings, including teaching, learning, and other remote and virtual services. So after review of the bids, Challenger Technologies was selected for the following reasons. 1, we have used them before and they do excellent work. And the second reason, they were the only vendor of the 3 vendors invited who submitted a bid. This contract will be covered by ITS budgeted resources, and the recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve a contract for single mode fiber installation from Challenger Technologies for an amount not to exceed $220,000.
Is that single bid in your mind a reasonable bid, Mr. Kruger?
Yes, that is a very reasonable bid. We've again, we've dealt with them before. They've done a lot of work for us and for other schools, and it's pretty much in line with what we thought it would be.
Any other questions? from any of the trustees? Thank you. Appreciate your input. Next, we have campus-wide access control system upgrade project. EVP Blakey is here to tell us about it. Please.
Thank you. We first talked about this at the March 2019 board retreat when we talked about security, both data and physical. The access control system controls 637 access points on campus. So you think about different buildings, classrooms, office doors, some gates on some of our counters. The system controls the opening, the closing of these access points. The system also controls putting the data access on staff ID cards as well as fobs, where it can control the areas that staff can access or not access. The system also monitors when areas are being accessed. We have control panels across campus. Those control panels feed to an access unit in a closet in the control panel. So these access units were first installed when we opened the Gundam building in 2002. The access units and the management system are approaching 20 years of use, and they're at end of life. And we've also maxed out. So again, each of these control panels have access units, and in some buildings like the BE building and student center, those panels have been maxed out. We can't add another access point to those buildings. So the proposed project would upgrade all the access units and control panels, as well as the software management system. Currently, we have 34 panels that support the 637 access devices. We would be adding an additional 28 panels that would allow us to expand to 1,000 access devices across campus. This expansion would allow external perimeter doors on most of the 14 college campus buildings to be added. Again, we have some buildings where we're still using keys to lock the outside perimeter doors. This is a problem if we need to lock the campus down or lock a building down remotely. In the case of emergency, we're not able to do that on some of our campus buildings. Other pending access control projects would include the renovation of the Morris Lawrence building, the renovation of the student center, where I anticipate we would have perhaps some other areas that would need to have access control units put in. The proposed project would be completed by Johnson Controls, which is a sole source for our access control and fire suppression systems. The proposed project requires a contract with Johnson Controls in an amount not to exceed $409,708.80. Thank you.
Does that 1,000 number include the potential for growth, or do we automatically utilize each of those 1,000 with this new program?
No, that would put us for a lot of growth. That we would have basically over 300 units that we would have capacity for. So that gives us a lot of room for growth.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, EVP Blakey.
Thank you.
Recommendation for new programs 2021-2022. Oh, excuse me. Appointment of external audit firm, EVP Johnson, please.
Great. Are we going to tab G, is it?
Yes.
Yes, please. Do we have tab G that we can put up, please? We'll have shortly. So while it's being put up, I'm glad to thank you very much. So after 11 years of our current external auditors, Raymond, at the request of the board, we went out for RFP. I'm really pleased. We had an amazing RFP committee that included prior college treasurer Angela Davis, foundation treasurer Nicole Torbert, AVP Snyder, director of financial aid Lori Trapp, our controller Ben Hunholz, finance director, finance manager Carrie Holt, and myself. It was a really good committee, and I want to thank them for all the time that they put in. We had 6 bidders for our auditing services, and through a scoring process, and you can see that on the attached bid sheet for kind of phase one, the initial scoring areas of background of the provider, their experience in higher education, their auditing services, their approach to the audit, customer service, and pricing. 4 of those firms were then selected, 4 out of the 6, to go to round 2. And that included Plant Moran and Raymond, Clifton Larson, and Andrews Hooper Pavlik. In round 2, we gave each firm about 6 specific questions that focus on areas of customer service and knowledge around particular areas of higher education, and how well that they would engage with appropriate government agencies that have an impact on the auditing standards, the accounting standards, and auditing processes. Also, another big area for us was financial aid. That's a really big area for the college, and just how well that they can service the client in providing useful tools as we adopt new standards. So we went through all those questions, and then we also looked at their audit rotation. So, you know, it was clear from prior discussions with the board and as a committee that there was strong value of rotation. And that's not to take anything away from Raymond, who we all believe did a fine job. But you will see on the bid sheet that we offered up to 15 points, or 10% of the total score, for audit rotation. And of course, Raymond would not be eligible for those points because we're interested in rotation as a value. So when we got all done, the committee's recommendation is that we would go with Andrews Hooper Pavlik, and we would offer up to the board a 3-year contract. That's what we went out for bid with. And, you know, as per that contract, it's a 3-year contract in terms of pricing. They offered flat pricing for the 3 years. They were very good on pricing, among other things. And if the college was unhappy after any one of those years, we would have the right to not renew them for the next year. But we are pleased to make that recommendation for Andrew Hooper Pavlik, or AHP, to be the college auditors.
Are there any questions about this audit appointment? Hearing none.
I just wanted to say it was.
Please, Angela.
It was a pleasure. It was quite interesting to sit and listen and evaluate the audit firms, and of course the one that we had been using for a number of years. And I remembered there was a board meeting a couple of years ago when Trustee Hatcher had brought up the question about, you know, why we're still with Raymond, or something to that effect, and it resonated with me, and this is why I put emphasis on that. Like, it was how long is too long to have an audit firm. And we really debated the subject and looked at all of the questions that discussed all the questions and answers with the different firms. And after the fact, we were able to dissect it all and really began to see that it would be beneficial to switch out and try something new. Something new meaning like fresh eyes and a fresh approach. And I was happy. Of course, it was, you know, a whole new avenue for me, even though I was a treasurer, but still, you know, the language and some of the terms that were used that new to me, but it was a learning experience, and I'm really pleased. I pray that our relationship with them will be successful between now, 2021 to 2023, and possibly beyond. But, you know, we are very happy with the choice that we made, and I do hope that it works out for us as well as for the foundation board.
Thank you. Our next discussion item is.
I'd like to make a comment.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I just want to thank Bill for doing this and thank the committee for taking the time to look for it. And I know I'm a proponent of the rotation theory, and I'm just very grateful that that work was done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Any other comments? Our next discussion matter is the recommendation for new programs 2021, 2022. EVP Hearns, please.
Right. Good evening. I'm very excited that we have 6 new programs that are being presented to everyone today. And many of them have some unique features. I won't go into all the details, but the first 3, Supply Chain Essential Certificate, Cybersecurity, and Cybersecurity Operations, are unique in that these all nestle into our associate's degree, but all 3 of those programs actually have industry certifications built into the courses of those programs, in all 3 of those programs. And for many of our students, again, that resume builder from a degree standpoint, as well as a certification from industry, is extremely important. Our Cardiac Telemetry Technician Certificate and Health Administration Associates in Science program are just really an additional effort on our behalf to add some more diversity to the offerings that we have, while also responding to industry and what jobs are out there. I'm really excited for the Healthcare Administration Associate's degree because look at the courses, is extremely collaborative. They worked closely with the business department to pick and choose which classes came from different areas. And I would say the same thing about the Arts Management Certificate. Again, really good collaboration focused on the entrepreneurial aspect of arts management, but again, a certificate in a program where they worked with the business department across multiple areas and really put together something that was robust to provide students with well-rounded skills and experience that will be valuable for them from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but as well as, in any workplace and situation. So these are the 3 new programs, the 6 new programs, and all 6 of them are for our fall 2021 catalog.
I have a questions.
Yes.
Please, Ruth.
I'm noticing, I'm trying not to get personal about this, but that every program we have is going to have a management component to it. And that might be a direction of Kim's influence, but arts management, we're going to have cyber management and healthcare management, and I look forward to that, but I suspect management's part of all of our new programs. Number 1. And number 2, in Sunday's Ann Arbor News, there was an article about permanent shifts in how people work, and jobs that are going away and jobs that are coming, people working at home more. And I know we're paying attention to that in terms of our programs, but I wanted to add one that I don't know if it's being thought of, and that is that there's so much conversation now about mental health as a result of the COVID, and that will continue probably. And what kind of job response, programming, preparation can we do for students who might want to do the social work, mental health on an associate degree level, or as a stepping stone to further that's something that might be a growing area. Just a thought. And it would be management too. We could do management, healthcare management.
Well, Ruth, I wish I could take credit as a business faculty, former business faculty member, that it was me in the management, but it was not. But specifically, I'll say, and I think Dr. Belanca talked about this probably about 2 years ago at one of our econ events, is that those management skills are what gets people those promotions to those next step jobs. And actually, Michael Naylor, especially this arts management one, this was all him. It was his idea. He's actually been trying to get this on the books for a couple of years now because he's seeing it as a need for students. Same thing with healthcare administration management. It's a growing field and there's a lot of jobs in that area. But I think those skills are being treated more tangibly in regards to the conversations we're having with liberal arts and communication and interpersonal skills. So I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. I'll let all the people who did the work, the faculty on that one, really kind of take credit for aligning the work that they do with, what industry is stating.
Yeah, and give some thought to mental health jobs, because I think there are going to be some out there. Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further comments on these new programs?
I have a question.
Please.
If I can, just real quick to VP Hearns. So would we need to hire additional faculty for the arts management? I was looking over this program and I thought about that, if we would need to add additional faculty to support this, or do we already have them in place?
Actually, when I made the comment about the collaboration with the arts management certificate, we really do have the faculty currently who can teach the courses, because again, what they did was they brought in the different areas and really, making better use of the courses we already offer in business, in digital video and audio tech. So in many cases, they're bringing together a collection of courses and they're actually developing some new ones, but those we do have faculty to develop those, and they're taking the lead on that so far. But again, we don't know, what might happen in the future if the program grows.
Well, if it does, I have a person in mind, so I will keep my ears open.
It's good.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Recommendation for discontinuation of programs 2021 is written in tab I, EVP Hearns.
All right, so we actually have two programs here to be discontinued. And the first one is our Linux Unix. Again, just being really responsive to, what programming language, what shifts are taking place in industry. And although we don't think there needs to be a shift away from Linux Unix, the full program actually is something that we're going to move away from. And then we took the courses that made sense to keep and were still a demand for, and put those actually in our computer networking program. So the courses still exist, but the actual certificate is what we're discontinuing. And then the cybersecurity program, the certificate here, two of the programs that I previously presented as new programs are just replacing this one program, made some updates to the program. And again, as I stated, added that industry certification to that cybersecurity program. I think the other thing that I would note is when we look at cybersecurity, like the other programs as well, but that definitely is an area where the demand is just truly outpacing how fast any school can produce people working in that field. So we're excited to see a lot more of our students go into that field and actually get lucrative jobs from completing those certificates and associate's degree.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on this recommendation?
I have a question.
Ruth Hatcher.
The new programs and discontinued have all gone through, the curriculum committee is still meeting?
Absolutely, they meet every week, every Thursday.
Great, thanks.
Any other comments? That concludes the discussion matters. We move to an action item. It's tab J in your packet. Receipt of FY20 single audit. The recommendation as it's written is that the board receive the FY20 single audit report as submitted. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we accept that.
And a second?
Second, DeVarty.
Is there any discussion on this recommendation? Hearing none. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis,
Yes.
Treasurer DeVarty,
DeVarty, yes.
Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher, yes.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming, yes.
Trustee Landau,
Landau, yes.
Trustee McKnight Morton.
McKnight Morton, yes.
The motion is carried. Thank you. Adjournment of monthly meeting, it says here. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this monthly meeting?
Move.
We have move and second. Is there any discussion? Vanessa, please call the roll.
Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis,
Yes.
Treasurer DeVarty,
Vardy, yes.
Secretary Hatcher,
Hatcher, yes.
Trustee Landau,
Landau, yes.
Trustee Fleming,
Fleming, yes.
Trustee McKnight Morton.
McKnight Morton, yes.
Thank you to everybody for your time this evening. Our meeting is adjourned.